Legal issue: welfare and safety of participants. The researcher must maintain the highest professional standards so as not to endanger the participants or themselves. The researcher should also treat all participants equally and only work within their area of competence. Before conducting any form of research, especially with the use of humans in an experiment, a risk assessment should be conducted to highlight any risks which could endanger the researcher and participants. This should be the key concern for every researcher. A researcher should only work within their level of competence. They should understand their level of expertise and work to these limits. For example, a person who has no experience in using syringes should not take blood samples. If a researcher does not comply with the rules, implications can be put in place to prohibit such actions. A tribunal can be given, leading to a fine, a written warning, or not being able to allow research to be conducted again. If these guidelines are violated, the researchers leave themselves open to legal or civil actions done by the court. There is also measures to stop future research under the influence of bases. A meeting is held of the particular case, and significant measures can be put in place to stop research temporarily or permanently. Suspension of permanent exclusion could be given by bases. An example of a case where such an issue arose was the Northumbria caffeine case at Northumbria University. 2 students suffered life-threatening effects when given 100 times too much caffeine in an orange juice. The university moved from using caffeine tablets with exact doses to a powdered form of caffeine measured out by the researcher. A dosage of 30 grams was given instead of 0.3 grams, 30 grams was given instead of 0.3 grams. Usually, in a cup of coffee, there is 0.1 grams of caffeine, so 0.3 grams would have been substantial enough to get us research results. Death had been reported at 18 grams, and it was lucky that both students were active and individuals, otherwise the worst outcome could have occurred, i.e. death. Both students were admitted to intensive care for analysis after the miscalculation led to violent side effects, especially on the heart. After this happened, research at Northumbria University was stopped, and it was shown that the university took no steps to make sure staff were fully qualified when conducting this experiment, and does not show any sign of helping the students measure out the correct dosage of caffeine. This human error issue led to the researcher not being experienced enough. As the research was halted, the university went through a tribunal and was fined £400,000 over the time. Research was also temporarily stopped. Equality and impartiality. Impartiality is where there should be equal treatment of all rivals or disputes, showing fairness over other people's opinions. Equality, on the other hand, is the equal treatment of people irrespective of social and cultural differences. For example, an Asian person who is Muslim working with a British Caucasian white Christian. To preserve the reputation of sport and exercise science, the researcher must maintain totally unbiased research in such actions and practices when working with someone within sport and exercise science. This means that the researcher must not let factors such as race, age, sex, or sexuality affect the work with the work on clients or results of the research. The exploitation of personal relationships should not be used for personal gain, i.e. a man and a woman and one's cheated on each other, and they shouldn't be using that sort of issue to get a different kind of research. Any decisions that the researcher makes must be totally objective and not situated from opinion. It should only be fact. If any of these factors are exploited and reported to the organisation, it has such power to temporarily or permanently halt research. For publication in the International Journal of Sports Medicine (IJSM), Studies involving human participants or animals must have been conducted in accordance with recognized ethical standards and national/international laws. At the very first submission stage, authors are required to confirm within the methods section of their own manuscript. Authors who do not provide any information regarding ethical approval will have their manuscripts rejected before it enters the peer review process without any option to resubmit. In the original 2009 IJSM editorial, I said that word wrong, editorial, we described the ethical considerations embedded into the national/international laws and provided specific guidance on the ethical issues which commonly arise in sports medicine research. In 2011, this research was updated to recognize the ethical principles of other professional associations and treaties when conducting research involving human participants. Research using human participants. Authors who cite the editorial confirm that research using human participants has been conducted ethically according to the principles of the Declaration of Helsinki. The declaration is intended to be read as a whole, and every principle is equally important, but those points most commonly considered by sport and exercise scientists are summarized below. Basic principles. Respect the rights and welfare of participants, which must take precedence over all other interests. Ethical review. Before research begins and before amendments are applied, research must be reviewed and approved by appropriate ethics committee. The research protocol. The study, research, design, and statistical analysis must be clearly described, justifiable, and appropriate. Drawing up the research protocol, the researcher must A. Consider ethical issues in accordance with the Declaration of Helsinki. B. Provide information regarding funding, sponsors, institutional affiliations, and other potential conflicts of interest. C. Consider the contribution to new knowledge and consider the environment. D. Include details of any incentive for participants and provisions for treating and/or compensating participants who are harmed because of participation in the research study. E. Describe the arrangements for post-study access by all participants to interventions identified as beneficial in the study or access to other appropriate care or benefits. 4. Consent. Informed consent/assent should be provided freely by the participant and should ideally be in writing. If written consent cannot be obtained or is not appropriate, then oral consent should be formally documented and witnessed. Research that involves children or other populations that cannot consent, e.g. vulnerable populations of third world countries, should seek consent from an appropriate person and asset from the participant. Research involving participants who are not physically or mentally incapable of giving consent may be undertaken only if the physical or mental condition that prevents giving an informed consent is a necessary characteristic of the research population. Informed consent/assent must include the A. Aims of the research. B. Methods. C. Sources of funding. D. Conflicts of interest. E. Institutional affiliations. F. Anticipated benefits and potential risks. G. Potential discomfort. And H. Right to refuse to participate or withdraw consent without referral. 5. Conduct. Research must be conducted in A. In accordance with appropriate risk management. B. By appropriately qualified researchers and support staff who are experienced in that level in that subject. C. With skills and care. D. In an appropriate setting where the environment is right for the research. E. In order to protect the privacy of participants and confidentiality of their own personal information. And F. In accordance with the laws and regulations of the country or countries in which in accordance with the laws and regulations of the country or countries.